Josh Lerner is Jacob H. Schiff, Professor of Investment Banking at Harvard Business School, and so great to have you here on NDTV, Professor Lerner.
It's great to be here.
My first question is exactly what was asked in the global financial context. Post the crisis, do we need much more regulation?
I think it's not so much the level of regulation as it is the smartness of the regulation. And in some ways, what worries me is not that we've seen more regulation, because I think it was very much needed, but in many cases it seems to be misdirected in going not necessarily the ways that really address the problems that are there. They're trying to address some things, but not necessarily the really crucial things.
And that's something Axel Weber was asked, because he's got this unique position because he's in UBS, but his past has been with the Bundesbank, so both the regulator and the private banker role. So how do you make that decision? Because most people aren't like that. Central bank governors usually don't know what the private sector wants or do not like what the private sector wants, and vice versa. So how do you play regulator and private sector interests at the same platform?
No, you're absolutely right. This is if it was easy, I'm sure in Europe, in the US, around the world, we would have gotten this right. But instead, it's clearly, in many cases, the political people know in some sense what the right answers are, but the political process takes on a momentum of its own and grows the wrong way. So we were talking today, for instance, about dealing with Solvency II, with dealing with risk measures. And in some sense, a solution that was applied for the banks is now being rolled out for insurance companies and pension funds, even though it doesn't necessarily make a lot of sense. And many smart people know it on the government side and the policy side, but sometimes once this regulation stuff takes on a momentum, it's like the train going down the tracks really fast, and it's very hard to stop it.
But I spoke to, the CEO of Prudential, Tijen Thiam, and he said, listen, there should be different rules for emerging markets because we are clearly in a very different space than the global market, developed world. So there has to be a discrimination in terms of that platform.
I very much agree. In a lot of times, what you see is sort of something what I call regulatory contagion, which is people sitting in emerging market governments say, well, they did this in Europe and they did this in the United States, so why don't we adopt the same approach? But I think in a lot of ways, as you alluded to, the situations are very different in terms of the kinds of problems that are there, the kind of financing needs, and so forth. And in a way, there's often a need for a different regulatory response.
And he also brought up this fact that, listen, hey, you guys can't sit here on this panel and say there's not going to be another financial crisis. There will be another financial crisis. We just don't know when it's going to happen because there's always a problem waiting to happen and build up. Do you think there are seeds of a financial crisis? I mean, today we heard about Barclays and LIBOR. We've heard about JP Morgan and the London Bail scandal. We know Standard Chartered in investigation for Iran sanctions. And it's such a wide gambit of scrutiny.
I think, if you read my colleague Ken Rogoff's book, you'd be convinced that financial crises are about as old as humanity has had money. He only went back 800 years, but I'm sure if he had the data, he would find it among the Babylonians. So in a way, the challenge is not, the real question is not when, but, not if, but when. And I think that we just have to understand that as long as humans are what they are, which is, let's just say it, they're greedy, they like to make money, and once things start going well, they'll try to push it forward. We're going to be in a situation where it's very hard to predict where it's going to pop up, but it's going to pop up somewhere.
But do you think QE3 has been the right response? Because Jamie Dimon said, and he's always flamboyant in his comments, but he said, listen, 100 years post today, when a book will be written about QE3, there'll be only good things written about it, that it was the best thing ever to happen for the financial world.
I think it's a great question. The one piece of good news for me is that I haven't studied macroeconomics since Larry Summers taught it to me in 1990. So I think I can be safely said that everyone else has a much better opinion than I do.
India's #1 news app just got even better. Download NDTV's new app. Fully optimized for Retina display. Full screen view. Faster response time. And Sudoku. NDTV's new iPad app. Download now.